The light rain fell steadily over New York City, casting a shimmering glow on the streets lined with twinkling Christmas lights. Inside Maison de Lumière, an upscale restaurant in Midtown, the atmosphere was one of refined elegance. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft golden light over tables adorned with fresh white lilies and crisp linen. Patrons in evening attire chatted in hushed tones, their laughter mingling with the faint clink of silverware. The servers moved gracefully, whispering among themselves about the woman at table 6 who had been waiting alone for what seemed like an eternity. Nora Kensington sat there, her posture impeccable, exuding the confidence of someone who commanded boardrooms and sealed multi-million-dollar deals. At 38, as the CEO of a thriving e-commerce conglomerate, she was used to control in her career, in her schedule, in her life. Tonight she wore a sleek black velvet dress that hugged her figure, her lips painted a bold red that matched the poinsettias on the nearby mantel. She glanced at her watch for the 6th time in 10 minutes, her manicured fingers tapping lightly on the stem of her untouched wine glass. This blind date, arranged through an exclusive app by a well-meaning colleague, was supposed to be with a successful entrepreneur, someone in a tailored Armani suit, perhaps arriving fashionably late to make an entrance, but as the minutes ticked by, doubt crept in. Then the door opened, letting in a gust of cool, damp air. The man who entered wasn't what she expected. His dark hair was tousled from the wind, and he wore faded jeans, a worn leather jacket, and scuffed boots that tracked in faint traces of rain. In his hand, he clutched a small box wrapped clumsily in recycled paper tied with a mismatched ribbon. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on table 6, and approached with a hesitant stride. "I'm so sorry I'm late," he said, his voice low and earnest as he slid into the seat across from her. "There was a bit of a hiccup getting my son to my mom's place." Nora blinked, her composure faltering for the first time that evening. This couldn't be right. She glanced toward the servers, who exchanged puzzled looks from across the room. The man before her didn't match the profile she'd been shown, no polished suit, no air of calculated charm. She opened her mouth to politely explain the mix-up, perhaps suggest he had the wrong table, when he pulled out his phone and tilted the screen toward her. A text message glowed on the display. "Meet her at 7 p.m. table 6, trust me." It was signed with a heart emoji from Ben. He smiled sheepishly, glancing over his shoulder toward the large window facing the street. There, pressed against the glass, was a boy about 8 years old, his face lit by the restaurant's warm lights. He waved enthusiastically, his breath fogging the pain. "That's Ben, my son," the man explained, rubbing the back of his neck. He thinks I shouldn't spend Christmas alone. I didn't realize until I got here that this might not be what you signed up for." Nora turned back, her initial confusion giving way to a flicker of intrigue. The elaborate setup she'd imagined, a sophisticated evening with someone from her world, shattered like fragile ornaments. This man wasn't here to impress with wealth or status. He was here because a child had orchestrated a simple act of kindness. She studied him, mid-30s, with kind, hazel eyes shadowed by fatigue and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. "I'm Ethan Brooks," he added, extending a hand. "And I promise, if this is a mistake, I'll leave right now. No hard feelings." Nora hesitated, then shook his hand, her grip firm. "Nora Kensington, and it's not entirely a mistake, at least not anymore." She gestured to the empty chair. "Sit. Tell me about Ben." As the server approached with menus, Ethan relaxed slightly, setting the wrapped box on the table. He explained how Ben Ever the Meddler had overheard him talking about feeling lonely during the holidays and taken matters into his own hands, hacking into Ethan's phone to respond to a dating app notification. Nora found herself chuckling, a rare sound in her tightly scheduled life. She shared a bit about her own world, long hours at the office, the pressure of leading a company, and the quiet evenings that followed. "You're a single parent, too?" Ethan asked, his tone gentle without judgment. Nora nodded, her guard lowering. "My daughter Lila, she's 9, stubborn, artistic, and convinced I work too much." Ethan's eyes softened. "Sounds familiar. Ben's the same, always pushing me to get out there. After my wife passed 3 years ago, he's been my anchor. But kids see things we don't, right?" The conversation flowed unexpectedly, weaving through the challenges of balancing grief work and parenthood. Nora spoke of her ex-fiancé who had left upon learning of her pregnancy, leaving her to build her empire alone. Ethan recounted quitting his engineering job at a major firm to care for his dying wife, now scraping by with freelance delivery gigs to be there for Ben. There were no boasts, no attempts to one-up, just raw shared understanding. As the rain pattered against the windows, the initial awkwardness faded. Nora glanced outside again where Ben had drawn a smiley face in the fog on the glass before being whisked away by his grandmother, who had arrived to pick him up. Ethan noticed her look and smiled. He's a good kid. Thinks everyone deserves a little magic on Christmas. For the first time in years, Nora felt seen, not as the powerful CEO, but as a woman navigating loss and love. The evening born from a child's innocent scheme had turned into something real. As they ordered dessert, warm chocolate cake to share, she wondered if this mix-up was fate's way of reminding her that connection didn't require perfection. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Nora watched as the server cleared away their barely touched appetizers, the elegant plates now forgotten amid the unexpected turn of the evening. The rain outside had picked up drumming a steady rhythm against the restaurant's large windows, but inside the warmth of the candlelight created a cocoon around their table. Ethan leaned back slightly, his jacket draped over the chair, revealing a simple button-down shirt that spoke of practicality rather than pretense. He wasn't the polished executive she'd anticipated, but there was something grounding about him, a quiet strength that drew her in despite herself. So Nora, Ethan began breaking the brief silence with a gentle smile. You mentioned you're a CEO. That sounds intense. What does a day in your world look like? She hesitated, unused to sharing the vulnerabilities beneath her professional facade. But something in his eyes, open without expectation, prompted her to respond. It's a lot of meetings, decisions that affect hundreds of people, and emails that never stop. Rewarding, but exhausting. And then there's Lila. She's my everything, but juggling it all. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing at both. Ethan nodded, his expression softening with recognition. I get that. I used to be an engineer at a big construction firm designing bridges, overseeing projects. Good pay, steady work. But 3 years ago, my wife Sarah was diagnosed with cancer. Everything changed overnight. Nora's breath caught. She hadn't expected such raw honesty so soon. I'm sorry, she murmured, her voice sincere. That must have been devastating. And he looked down at his hands, tracing the edge of the tablecloth. It was. She fought hard, but in the end, she passed. I quit my job to be there for her and Ben. Now I do freelance delivery gigs, flexible hours so I can pick him up from school, make dinner be the dad he needs. Some days it's scraping by on tips and tight budgets, but he's worth it. Tonight I was late because he didn't want to stay at my mom's without me on Christmas Eve. He gets scared being alone at night during the holidays. The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Nora felt a pang in her chest, a mirror to her own hidden scars. Lila's the same way, she admitted, her voice quieter than intended. She's 9, full of energy and opinions, but she worries about me too. I haven't dated in 5 years, not since her father left. He was my fiancé, and when I told him I was pregnant, he said it wasn't part of his plan. He walked out, and I built everything on my own. The company, the late nights, proving I could do it all. But dating? No one's interested in a busy single mom with priorities that don't revolve around them. Ethan's gaze met hers, steady and without pity. That's their loss. Sounds like you've built something incredible for yourself and Lila. The server returned, placing 2 mugs of hot cocoa before them. Ethan had insisted on it instead of wine, adding with a grin. With marshmallows if you have them. Ben swears they're the secret to a good night. Nora stared at the steaming drink, the marshmallows melting into fluffy clouds. She couldn't remember the last time someone had ordered something so whimsically comforting for her. A soft laugh escaped her lips. Lila hates marshmallows, says they're too squishy, but she forces me to eat them sometimes, claiming I need more sweetness in my life because, Mom, you're getting old and grumpy. Ethan chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. Kids have a way of cutting right to the truth, don't they? Ben's always telling me to smile more, like it's that easy. But they're right. We're the ones who complicate things. As they sipped their cocoa, the conversation deepened naturally. Nora shared stories of sleepless nights when Lila was sick, rushing from board meetings to doctor's appointments, and the guilt of canceled vacations because work demanded more. Ethan countered with tales of budgeting for school supplies on a shoestring, teaching Ben to cook simple meals after Sarah's passing, and the quiet ache of holidays without her. There were no complaints, no bids for sympathy, just a shared rhythm of understanding that neither had experienced in years. "We're not like the people on those dating apps," Ethan said thoughtfully, stirring his mug. "We come with baggage, whole worlds built around our kids. Schedules, worries, the works." Nora nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Exactly. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe we need someone who isn't scared to step into that world." Time slipped away unnoticed. The restaurant began to empty, patrons bundling up against the rain as they left. Nora glanced at her watch, nearly midnight. "You should get back to Ben," she said reluctantly. Ethan stood pulling on his jacket. "Yeah, I should. But, Nora, thank you for not sending me away. This was nice. Unexpected, but nice." They walked to the door together, the air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the city lights reflecting in puddles like scattered stars. Ethan extended his hand, and Nora shook it, holding on a moment longer than necessary. His touch was warm, steady, a contrast to the cold night. As he disappeared into the street hailing a cab, Nora stood there, the wrapped box he'd left on the table now in her hands. She unwrapped it slowly, a handmade ornament, a simple star carved from wood with hope etched into it. A child's gift, perhaps from Ben. Her heart thawed a little more in the winter chill, wondering if this chance encounter was the start of something she hadn't known she needed. 1 week after that unexpected Christmas Eve encounter, Ethan pulled up to the elementary school in his weathered pickup truck, the engine rumbling softly as he waited in the pickup line. The winter sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the playground where children bundled in coats chased each other in bursts of laughter. Ben emerged from the building, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his cheeks flushed from the cold. He climbed into the truck with a grin that lit up his face. "Dad, guess what?" Ben said, buckling his seatbelt. "I made a new friend today. Her name's Lila. She's really good at drawing, and she said her mom gets sad sometimes just like you do." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Lila, the name Nora had mentioned for her daughter. He forced a casual tone. "That's great, buddy. Tell me about her." As Ben chattered on about recess games and shared crayons, Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? By the end of the week, the connection became undeniable. Lila had invited Ben over to play after school, and when Ethan arrived at the address, a modest brownstone in a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood, Nora opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise. "You," she said, a smile breaking through her initial shock. "I guess fate's got a sense of humor." Ethan laughed, rubbing the back of his neck as Ben darted inside to find Lila. "Or our kids are better matchmakers than we thought." The playdate unfolded effortlessly. Ben and Lila bonded instantly over a game of checkers, Ben's strategic mind pitting against Lila's creative twists, turning the board into a story of kings and queens. While the children laughed in the living room, Ethan and Nora found themselves in the kitchen washing dishes side by side. The domestic rhythm felt natural, almost familiar. As suds swirled down the drain, Ethan opened up more about his past. "Sarah's illness came out of nowhere," he said quietly, drying a plate. "I was on track for a promotion, overseeing major projects of the works. But I walked away to be with her and Ben. People called me foolish, said a man should prioritize his career, but Ben didn't need a successful engineer, he needed his dad." Nora paused, her hands still in the soapy water. The words resonated deeply, stirring memories of her own abandonment. Her ex had left because a child didn't fit his ambitious life plan, climbing the corporate ladder without the burden of family. She wiped her hands and turned to him. "I understand that more than you know. My fiancé bolted when I chose to keep Lila. I built my company from scratch after that, proving I could handle it all. But it left me guarded." Their conversations during these visits grew deeper, weaving through the everyday struggles of single parenthood. Ben's passion for chess led to impromptu tournaments with Lila sketching the winners in vibrant colors. The children's friendship bridged the gap, turning chance meetings into a budding routine. But the harmony shattered one crisp morning at the school gate. Nora arrived early to drop off Lila, lingering to chat with other parents. As she stood there, snippets of conversation floated her way. "That delivery guy! The one with the boy who's friends with Lila! Yeah, heard he's scraping by on gigs, probably eyeing a rich single mom like Nora to climb up." Laughter followed, sharp and judgmental. "Men like that always looking for a handout." Nora froze, her face burning. She glanced toward the playground where Lila held Ben's hand as they walked to class, oblivious to the whispers. The sight twisted something inside her innocent friendship, tainted by adult prejudice. That evening, her fingers hovered over her phone before typing, "Can we meet alone? Park near my place, 8 p.m." The park was quiet under the street lamps, the benches slick from an earlier drizzle. Ethan arrived on time, his expression concerned. Nora didn't waste words. "I overheard some parents today talking about you, calling you a failure, saying you're after someone like me for money." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't explode. He sat beside her, staring at the ground. "I've heard worse. Comes with the territory when you choose family over a fat paycheck." "I'm sorry," Nora said, her voice trembling. "I didn't say anything. And the truth is, I used to think like them, judging people by their job title, their bank account. Before Lila, that's who I was." He looked at her, then his eyes searching. "And now, what do you think now?" She met his gaze steadily. "I think you're the kind of man who deserves more than whispers behind your back, the kind who loves his son enough to rebuild everything from scratch." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I don't care what they say about me, but I won't let Ben grow up ashamed of who we are, of the choices I've made." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling. Then Nora spoke softly. "So, where do we go from here?" "With kindness," Ethan replied. "If you're open to it, no pressure, just seeing where this leads." Unbeknownst to them, Ben and Lila had sneaked a peek from a nearby bush where Nora's sitter had brought them for a quick walk. Ben whispered to Lila, "I think they like each other." Lila nodded solemnly. "They deserve to be happy, like us." 3 weeks had passed since that tense conversation in the park, and the rhythm of Ethan and Nora's lives had shifted in subtle, undeniable ways. What began as occasional playdates orchestrated by Ben and Lila evolved into a quiet routine. Drop-ins became regular afternoons filled with the sounds of children giggling over board games, the scent of homemade pasta sauce simmering on the stove, or the scratch of crayons on paper as Lila sketched fantastical scenes while Ben plotted his next chess move. Ethan and Nora moved around each other with growing ease, their conversations weaving through the mundane and the meaningful without force. The bond deepened in the silences and the small gestures, Nora packing an extra lunch for Ben on busy days, Ethan fixing a leaky faucet in her kitchen without being asked. Neither labeled it as dating. It was simply being there, a presence that filled the gaps left by years of solitude. Yet beneath the surface, something stirred a warmth that made Nora's heart quicken. When Ethan's hand brushed hers while passing a plate, or when he looked up from helping Lila with her homework, his eyes soft with unspoken affection. One rainy evening, the fragility of their budding connection was tested. Nora's phone buzzed late. Lila had spiked a fever after school, her cheeks flushed, and her small body curled under blankets. Exhausted from a grueling day at the office, Nora texted Ethan, "Can you help get her to the urgent care? I'm stuck in traffic." He arrived within minutes, his truck pulling up to her door with headlights cutting through the downpour. Ethan scooped Lila up, gently wrapping her in a blanket and carrying her on his back to shield her from the rain. At the clinic, he sat in the waiting room, holding her hand as the doctor examined her. Nora burst in half an hour later, breathless and disheveled, only to find Ethan stroking Lila's hair, murmuring a silly story about a brave knight and a dragon to distract her from the thermometer. The sight stopped Nora in her tracks, the man she'd once dismissed as a stranger, now cradling her daughter with the tenderness of a father. "Thank you," she whispered as they left Lila drowsy with medicine in her arms. Ethan glanced at her, his voice steady. "She's Ben's friend. And your girl. I know what it's like to be scared of losing what you love most." The real turning point came at the school's winter festival a few days later. The auditorium buzzed with parents and children, colorful banners strung across the stage for the art presentation. Ben and Lila had been selected to share their drawings on the theme, "The Person I Cherish Most." As the teacher called them up, Nora and Ethan sat side by side in the audience, exchanging nervous smiles. Ben went first, unveiling a sketch of Ethan with a toolbox captioning it, "My Dad Who Fixes Everything." Applause rippled through the room. Then Lila stepped forward, her drawing a vibrant scene of 4 figures holding hands, Nora, Lila, Ethan, and Ben. "This is my family," she announced proudly into the microphone. "I don't have a dad yet, but I think I've found one. He makes my mom smile again." The room fell silent for a beat. Then murmurs erupted. Nora overheard the whispers. "Isn't that the delivery guy? The one barely making ends meet?" Another voice chimed in, laced with disdain. "Nora's slumming it with a single dad like that must be desperate." Heat rose in Nora's cheeks, anger mixing with protectiveness. Before she could think, she stood her voice carrying across the auditorium. "We're not perfect. I'm a single mom who's made mistakes, and he's a single dad who's chosen family over everything else. But if a child like Lila can see love here, maybe the rest of us should learn to look with our hearts instead of our judgments." The room hushed. The teacher clapped first, then a few parents joined the applause, growing into a wave. Ethan sat stunned, his hand finding Nora's under the seat, squeezing it tightly. That night, back at his small apartment, Ben tugged at Ethan's sleeve as he tucked him in. "Dad, do you love Nora?" Ethan paused, sitting on the edge of the bed. He nodded slowly. "I think I do, Bud. But love isn't about rushing into marriage or big gestures. It's about showing up, understanding each other, and not running when things get tough." Ben yawned, content. "Good. She makes you happy, like Mom did." The next day, Nora appeared at the repair shop where Ethan worked weekends, fixing appliances and gadgets for extra cash. She placed a small box on the counter, an old pocket watch, its hands frozen in time. "Can you fix this? It stopped years ago." Ethan examined it, his fingers deft. "It'll take some work, but I'll try." Nora leaned in, her eyes meeting his. "I don't need you to be perfect, Ethan. I just need you like this. Steady kind, real." He set the watch down, his hand covering hers. "Then let's keep trying together." 3 months after the school festival, the quiet evolution of Ethan and Nora's lives had woven them into something resembling a family. The judgmental whispers at the school gate had faded, replaced by tentative nods from other parents who now saw Ethan not as a struggling delivery driver, but as a devoted father. Nora, once guarded and solitary, had opened her world wider, inviting Ethan and Ben over for weekend dinners, sharing stories of her high-stakes workdays and confiding in the small fears that kept her up at night. Their connection grew, not in grand declarations, but in the everyday, a thermos of soup left on her doorstep after a long meeting, a late-night text, checking if she'd made it home safely, an umbrella forgotten on her coat rack that he retrieved the next day with a sheepish grin. The affection between them deepened subtly like roots taking hold in fertile soil. Ethan found himself lingering longer during drop-offs, his hand brushing Nora's as they said goodbye. Nora caught herself smiling at memories of his quiet humor, the way he made Lila laugh with silly impressions or taught Ben to tie knots with patient encouragement. It wasn't fireworks. It was steady like the tick of the pocket watch Ethan had repaired and returned to her, its hands now moving in perfect rhythm. The final twist arrived on a drizzly afternoon. Ethan's phone rang while he was fixing a neighbor's toaster in his garage workshop. It was his old boss from the engineering firm. "We're reopening the project engineer position, Ethan. You were the best we had. Flexible hours if you need them. We've changed since you left." He stared at the phone after hanging up the offer, a bridge back to stability. But his mind went to Ben's soccer games, Lila's art shows, and Nora's tired smiles after late nights. "Only if I can clock out on time for the kids," he told himself. That evening, under a sky heavy with rain, the 4 of them gathered at a cozy cafe in the park, the same one where they'd confronted the gossip months before. Steam rose from mugs of hot cocoa marshmallows bobbing like tiny islands. Ben and Lila huddled over a sketch pad, inventing a game where they drew hybrid animals and guessed their names, their laughter cutting through the patter of rain on the windows. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded envelope, handing it to Nora. "You should read this at home," he said softly. "It's not from me." Curiosity piqued. She opened it there, unfolding the paper to reveal Ben's childish handwriting, the letters uneven but deliberate. "Dear Nora, thank you for being friends with my mom in heaven. She watches us, I think, and she's happy you're here. Thank you for being friends with my dad on Earth. He smiles more now. You make our family not need to look like everyone else's. Love, Ben." Tears welled in Nora's eyes, spilling over as she read the words again. The simple honesty pierced her a child's view, unclouded by the complexities adults imposed. Ethan watched her, his own eyes misting. Lila looked up from her drawing concern, furrowing her brow while Ben beamed proudly. "I didn't know he wrote that," Ethan murmured, his voice thick. "But he's right. You've brought light back into our days." Nora wiped her cheeks, folding the letter carefully. "And you've shown me that love doesn't have to be perfect or planned. It's just showing up." As the rain eased outside, they lingered at the table, the children returning to their game. Ethan leaned closer to Nora, his whisper barely audible over the cafe's hum. "I can't promise to make you happy every single day." She turned to him, her hand finding his under the table. "I don't need that. Just promise you won't walk away when I'm grumpy or overwhelmed." He squeezed her hand, a soft laugh escaping. "Deal." They stepped out into the twilight, the air fresh and cool. Ben and Lila skipped ahead, splashing through shallow puddles, their voices echoing with joy. Ethan and Nora walked side by side, shoulders brushing, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink. No proposals, no dramatic vows, just two hearts brave enough to embrace the messy beauty of blending lives. In that moment, under the fading light, they understood not every family starts with a wedding. Sometimes it begins with a forgotten umbrella, a mug of cocoa, a handwritten letter, and the quiet courage to love again.